Hey y'all, hey. It's lighting up bright, ain't it? It's your girl Morgan Renee Myers tuning in with you all for another reading. Storytime with More of Mine, Trying to Sleep in the Bed You Made by Virginia D. Berry and Donna Grant. Yes, this book has two authors. They wrote it together. We are in chapter 15. If you have not already, go to my YouTube, subscribe, Morgan Myers, or type in Storytime with More of Mine. You'll see my channel. You'll see the playlist Storytime with More of Mine. You'll see all the past books I've read, the current books I'm reading, and the future books to come. You'll see on there. So if you need to catch up with this book and other books, please go do that. So we are in 15, and it starts off with a quote that be coming from out of the chapter, and it says, "You can't save your life worrying about some people." Okay. Take a good, slow stretch. You earned it. Damn straight. Pat sat on the gym floor, her legs straight in front of her. She glanced at her watch as she reached for her toes. 6:47. Almost over. The class was jammed with hard-bodied corporate overachievers looking to start their day with a burn before they went to work and set the world on fire. Pat despised this pre-dawn torture session, but when her determination flagged, she visualized herself in that new short black leather skirt and cropped red leather jacket, size 10, thank you very much. She wanted to keep the weight off, and this was the only way to fit into exercise because her days at CGG were long, and her nights, many at the office, the rest on the town, were even longer. Before the end of class applause, she tugged her trench over her leotards and headed out the door to hop a cab. Pat preferred her own shower with the fluffy towels and nobody else's funky wet footprints on the towel. Besides, she was home so seldom, she looked for opportunities to enjoy her East 17th Street apartment. She paid enough rent. Pat picked her sneakers off, continued down the hall past the... What is this fancy word? I hate when them cars make all the noise. Is it necessary? Alright, what's this word? Eptageret? I have no clue. E with apostrophe. T-A-G-E with apostrophe going the other way. R-E. Pat kicked off her sneakers, continued down the hall past the Eptageret. Baby, I keep saying I need to get a dictionary. Next book, I hope to have a dictionary in hand because I have no clue what some of these words are. And my context clues ain't picking up tonight. So anyway, I guess it's a dress or something. She continued down the hall past the etagere that displayed her collection of carved African combs and heaped her sweaty gym clothes on the floor of her closet. Cleaning lady is coming today. She could take care of it. When she first hired a woman to clean, Pat worried that her messiness would be dinner table talk the way Aunt Loretta used to complain about her clients. Once in a while, she wondered if Aunt Loretta was still cleaning and funneling lifestyle tips to Gail, but her former friend, her used-to-be sister, was still too hot a topic for her to hold on to, so she dropped it. Pat got over her uneasiness in a hot hurry and quite enjoyed plump sofa pillows, the tart smell of lemon oil lingering in the air, and neat piles of clean clothes that appeared at the foot of her bed like the laundry fairy had brought them. Her time was too valuable to spend on housework. Pat prided herself on fitting more in a day than anybody else could. Her agenda bulged at the sides, confirming she didn't have one moment to spare. In the kitchen, she flicked on the TV. When Pat was home, a set was usually on so she could check out the competition's ads. She poured a cup of coffee from the pot that was timed for 6:45 a.m., swallowed a vitamin with the first swig, tore the bready center out of the half bagel, then munched on the crust as she headed for the bathroom. In the shower, a blast of cold water and some peppermint suds cut the sweat. I have to drop Susan a note. Pat had met the editor last night at the Essence Awards, and she was ever conscious of building her network. Then she let a thought of Reggie dart through her mind while she loofed her thighs. Reggie Singleton was a stockbroker and her current companion of choice when the occasion required a date or she needed to get laid. Strictly speaking, he wasn't handsome, but tall and stringy with colorless skin of Coney Island sand. He oozed success from the crisp dollars of his custom shirts to his hand-sewn mirror-shine wingtips. Reggie had a son and daughter from a previous marriage and a vasectomy, a convenience Pat appreciated greatly. Reggie was as single-minded about his career as she was, so there was no misunderstandings about commitment. Neither of them wanted any. The sex last night was good and plenty. She dragged out of Reggie's bed at 5:20 and was at the gym by 6. Pat preferred sleepover dates at her escort's place because he'd have to deal with the sticky sheets. Reggie liked them because she was good at finding herself. Reggie liked them because she was good at finding the door by herself. He was a decent roll in the hay, but last night he suggested they take a trip together. I don't think I can take him for a week in Bermuda. He will bore me to tears. But she had more important things on her mind than a vacation. The announcement of which producer would be elevated to group head was expected any day. Lloyd Zabriskie had become VP, Director of Broadcast Production, after a rift in the agency over whether to solicit takeover bids left the position open. In the last 2 years, so many independent shops have been swallowed by international mega behemoth agencies, it was hard to know who was in the bed together and who was on tops. After bitter fighting, CGG lost a horde of key people to Trafalgar Trace Worldwide Limited, their most widely rumored overtaker. Several accounts threatened to follow. Rumors wore running shoes at the agency and morale wallowed in the gutter, but Ted Gravitt rallied the staff and stabilized the situation. Pat paid lip service to the shame of losing so many talented people, but she secretly cheered the shakeup. It made room for her to ease on up the ladder. For weeks, all the producers had been jockeying for position and privately handicapping each other's chances to succeed Lloyd. Pat emerged as one of the favorites, but lots of folks weren't happy about that. Pat had a reputation for being difficult and exacting. She knew that meant she was a bitch with big brass ones, but she liked that and kept them polished. A tough negotiator, she kept the budgets down on her projects by examining every detail and finding ways to do it for less. Scouting new directing talents was her trademark, and she had developed a stable of competent, no-name directors who worked their asses off on a shoot instead of the big-name, bigger budget directors whose egos to match who the creators always fought for. Pat trimmed the production schedules to the bone and took pride in finishing on time and within budget. Clients loved her because her commercials had pizzazz without breaking the bank, and so did the account execs because happy clients made their jobs easier. Out of the shower, a quick blow dry, some hot rollers, and her short curly do was done. Pat smoked while she applied her executive producer face, carefully accenting her now well-defined cheekbones. Sometimes she still found herself craving buttermilk donuts like Aunt Loretta used to make, or pastrami heroes, especially when the pressure was on. But then she'd immerse herself in work and smoke until the hunger passed. Pat sat on the end of her bed to pull on pantyhose. As far as she was concerned, there was nobody in the shop who should be promoted but her. Althea made group head almost 3 years ago. The situation had been tense for a while when rumor had it that Tom Reynolds would get the nod over Althea. Pat tiptoed on thin ice during the whole episode. Tom had been her boss, and Pat knew he was a better producer, but Althea had been at CGG longer, and she was Pat's friend, so if lines were drawn, she'd side with Althea. They discussed strategy over many a cocktail. Fortunately, Tom surprised everybody and left for L.A. to produce a flick directed by her college friend. Pat fastened the clasp on her signature pearl choker. With her first year-end bonus, she splurged on real ones and retired mild-raised fake ones to the Bergamotian. Black silk shell, black skinny mini, white and black tick-check knit waist jacket, and skyscraper pumps. Then Pat did her twirl in the full-length hall mirror. While she wasn't exactly a swan, she learned the secret of good packaging and how to work what she had. Pat grabbed her keys, her suitcase, and she was out the door by 7:30. Althea assured her she had a lot on group head. Althea assured her she had a lot on group head. Can't be a soul but you, she said. Supervising other producers would mean headaches to the 10th power, but Pat felt she was ready. She'd see a nice chunk of change in her paycheck, too. Maybe it'll finally be time to approach my father. The hope of adding Turner Hughes' portrait to the gallery of Earthsock's relatives displayed around her apartment kept Pat motivated, even when she was less than thrilled with the prospect of producing yet another 15-second selling extravaganza for a product nobody needed. For as little as Pat thought about her, Verna might as well be dead and buried, but her bonus clan had expanded from the great aunt she adopted in college and now included grandparents and even Dr. and Mrs. Reed posed in front of late 50s Buick. But she ditched the whole crew in a heartbeat for a picture of her father, her real father. Maybe a snapshot of the two of them with his arm around her shoulder. Pat diligently followed his career, kept tabs on the Hughes companies, and never forgot the proud, stern faces of her ancestors that kept watch from the walls of Hughes' house. Although he made fewer appearances at Republican White House dinners, Turner Hughes remained in the limelight. In addition to Newark, a head-up centers had opened in Bridgeport, D.C., and Boston. 2 months ago, she slipped an article about a building in Hell's Kitchen he'd acquired for his first center in New York. It would open in the fall. The timing was flawless. Her bitterness toward PJ hadn't kept her from volunteering time at the church where they met. She found it was the perfect way to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas since she had no family demands and didn't want to fall prey to invitations from acquaintances who pitied the holiday lonely. When the new center opened, she'd switch her allegiance to a hand up and get more involved. With her promotion, she might even have enough clout to persuade CGG to produce free public service ads for the nonprofit agency. On the cab ride to the office, she daydreamed about approaching Turner at his annual Martha Vineyards affair. Despite yearly invitations from Minnie Littlefield, she seemed determined to fill every moment since Dorothea's passing. Pat hadn't ventured back to the vineyard because the thought of a social situation that involved Mr. and Mrs. Peter Jackson made her stomach turn. But she would even risk that torture to talk to her father. She'd introduce herself, engage him in a witty conversation, and make an offhand suggestion about the ads. He'd give her a business card and tell her to get some ideas to him. She knew she wouldn't work with him directly, but he'd be aware of her professionalism, and she'd see to it he was impressed with the results. Slowly, she'd work herself into his sphere, and when the time was right, she'd tell him. At least he'd be shocked, but by then, he'd know and trust her. She'd be discreet, of course. The last thing she wanted was to embarrass him. Every now and again, she'd try on Patricia Hughes just for size, but she knew that was out of the question unless, of course, he offered. Then, maybe, she'd hyphenate. More than anything, though, she wanted him to be proud, and since she wasn't looking for anything but his acceptance and respect, she was sure it would work out when the time was right. But that was the future. Right now, she had projects at critical stages, and she got to the office revved and ready. She read her assistant summary of the marketing profile of the 18-35-year-old sports enthusiast for her afternoon red alert meeting with the Tasty team. After years of trying, they hadn't made any headway in the sports beverage market, and for the first time in a decade, they were making noises about leaving the agency. They wanted a new, more aggressive image for Sports Quencher, and Creative had some ideas to run by her. Then she went over her notes and her checklist before her 10:30 meeting with everybody responsible for the campaign to introduce Adventurer, a new four-wheel drive sport utility vehicle. The Adventurer creators built a campaign around the tagline, engineered to conquer an all-terrain planet. New car launches were a very big, high-prestige deal, and Pat had worked long hours to devise around the world and 2-week shooting schedule. That would... About to hop off here, y'all. I'm gonna be able to finish this chapter tonight. Okay. New car launches were big, very big, high prestige deal, and Pat had worked long hours to devise an around the world in 2-week shooting schedule that would capture the car driving over and through swamp, sand, tundra, and Times Square. She still had mosquito bites the size of quarters from the Everglades last week, and she was leaving straight from the office to fly to Alaska, where the Adventurer could plow through snowy mountain passes in July. Thought you'd like to see what your friend has to say about you. Chris Parker slid a memo on Pat's desk, then perched on the chair opposite her, crossed her perfectly creased pants, and sipped from a CGG mug. I love a man who can dish before coffee break. Pat shook her head, but never before brunch on Sundays. He gave her a wicked grin. After the first year, Pat realized Chris wasn't a threat, and she actually found him entertaining in a bitchy way. He made producer eventually, but he only did local clothing discounters and supermarkets, nothing national. Go on, read it, and freak. Pat took the paper, expecting a reminder about covering the VCRs in the conference room after use, but as she read, her brow wrinkled. Where the hell did you get this? I never reveal my sources, but don't thank me. The cat fight will be a reward enough. The memo from Althea to Lloyd offered her critique of the producers being considered for the group head position. Pat couldn't keep the words in her head, so she read aloud. Patricia Reed is a maverick who, while very effective on her own, is not a team player. She has shown skill as a producer, but she has an antagonistic relationship with several key art directors, and her abilities as a manager need further development. I don't believe this shit. Are you sure this is for real? Would I bother you with slanderous falsehoods? Well, possibly, but not this time. I'm afraid Miss Satterfield wrote this little dirty all by herself. Chris stood. I'll leave you to your revenge. Do remember to tell me the gory details. Pat headed, memo in hand, straight for Althea's office. She could hear her at lunch. Pat headed to Althea's office. She could hear her at lunch day before yesterday. I don't know what kind of spell you cast over Lloyd, but when it comes to this promotion, the only two words he seems to know are Patricia and Reed. Pat refused to feel hurt. That would imply she expected more friendship, and she prided herself on having learned that lesson. She just hated it when somebody thought they got over. What's up? You look kind of tense. Althea plucked a card from her address file. Pat stood, arms akimbo, the paper dangling at her hip. What do you think is holding up the big announcement? Cool as a breeze, she waited to hear what lie Althea had to tell. I haven't heard a word. I don't know what you're worried about. You're going to hear before anybody else does. Maybe not. Some people think I'm not ready. Some people don't think I'm ready. You can't live your life worried about some people because they mostly have their own agendas. Althea leaned back in her chair and propped her hands behind her head. I guess you would know, Althea, but since we Mavericks like to get our news from the horse's mouth, maybe you could tell me if Zabriskie asked you to write this memo or if you volunteered. Pat sauntered to the desk and placed the memo in front of her. Althea didn't break a sweat or miss a beat. No harm intended. If I give you a glowing review, Zabriskie and the rest of the folks will assume because we're both black, we stick together. It makes my judgment look shaky, and we don't do you any good. But it makes my judgment look shaky and won't do you any good either. Pat stared at Althea like she had antlers. So you're saying you badmouth me because we're both black and it looks bad if you recommend me for a promotion? That's the biggest load of bullshit I ever heard. Althea leaned forward, placed her hands on top of the memo. Personally, I hope they give it to you. Don't even bother, Althea. Why would I believe anything you say now? Listen, there's only going to be a few of us with a title beyond secretary. Althea reached for his cigarettes. And you figured I wouldn't notice your sister sticking out of my back because you decided the few shouldn't include me? Is that right? Althea lit up. You give me far too much credit. Zabriskie, Green, Gravett, they're going to do exactly what they damn well please. Then you stay the hell out of my way, Pat barked. Althea's eyes narrowed and she blew smoke through her nostrils. You know, I got you hired. Althea, I got me hired. So let's stop right there. My grades, my work. So don't take credit for what you didn't do and expect me to play the grateful sidekick because I'm not. It's a damn good thing I'm not in one of your groups. You probably have cooked up some shit to get me fired. And you needn't bother speaking to me unless it's unavoidable business because pleasantries are no longer required or welcome. Althea folded her arms on the desk. Don't think you scare me, Patricia. I've been threatened worse on the playground in Brooklyn. You should also know I always won. Your childhood victories don't interest me. This ain't no playground. I'm not playing. Pat wheeled and left. Pat closed her office door and sucked all the smoke out of the 3 cigarettes. Whenever she got this angry, she went to Althea to vent. That's fucking hilarious. But she didn't laugh until she stubbed out her cigarette in the CGG ashtray. It's probably bugs. Pat ordered chicken deal on a roll, a double espresso, and a bag of Milano cookies. And while she waited for delivery, tried to remember anything she told Althea in confidence that could come back to haunt her. She bitched about Giles all the time, but that wasn't a secret. She argued with him in his face. Tom had recommended her promotion to producer, so if Althea actually told him Pat referred to him as an obnoxious know-it-all white boy, he probably took it as a compliment. She thought about going straight to Zabriskie, but she wasn't supposed to have seen the memo in the first place, and she'd have to explain where she got it. Besides, what could I say? Althea called me names. That was lame in 2nd grade. My work will stand up for me. The tasty meeting was frantic. The creatives were toying with the idea of building the campaign around high-performance athletes like marathoners, mountain climbers, and channel swimmers who walk a little of the wild side. Take it to the limit was the working title for the spots. Michael is committed to the competition, and Tasty is too cheap to sign him anyway. Giles sneered. He let his prematurely gray hair grow long enough for a ponytail, the over 40 and still hip hairstyle of choice in advertising. When Pat's assignment nudged her and tapped his watch to remind her the car would be downstairs in 15 minutes, there was a preliminary list of athletes to pitch. Since Pat's assistant wasn't going on the Alaskan leg of the trek, she left him with instructions to check on their availability and free range while she was away. Then she was out the door. What the hell am I going to do if Althea screwed me out of this promotion? Her traveling companions, the adventurer AD, and the director went to sleep after dinner, but Pat was still too angry to sleep on the cross-country flight. Yes, there were people who had been at CGG longer. Althea put in 10 years before she made group head. That's not my problem. There's an open spot, and I'm ready. And Pat was ready to finally meet her father, and she counted on the job to help her make that happen, to show him she was somebody he could be proud of. Althea had probably lied to him too, or invented some scheme to use him. That's really what happened. Althea's warning about men like Turner had haunted Pat since her summer internship. Now, as they descended towards SeaTac Airport, she dismissed it. She lied about me. She's just like Verna. She'd lie about anybody if it suited her. They caught a connecting flight to Anchorage, then took a private plane practically to the door of their lodge in Shatina, a tiny town at the edge of the Chugach Mountains. On the first day, Pat spent the morning with the director and the AD, I guess that means assistant director, strapped into a four-seater plane the size of a winged sofa, scouting locations. Despite the spectacular beauty of the snow-glazed peaks, Pat stayed focused on finding a large plateau close to the airstrip so that he could helicopter the adventurer and stunt driver to the location. After lunch, the driver arrived. They showed him the locations and mapped out their shots for the next day. On day 2, snow squalls kept the crew grounded in the lodge all morning. Periodically, the pilot checked in, but the news wasn't encouraging. Even if the snow stops, the wind's got to pipe down before we can fly. Okay, we still got a little more chapters, and I'm getting tired, so I'm going to end it here. We're on page, 191? All right, we're going to end it here, and I'll tune in with y'all again soon for part 2 of chapter 15. Thanks for tuning in.